we're now going to have a look at a fixed personal abseil. So the context here would be I wanted to approach a sea cliff, perhaps somewhere like Pembrokeshire or something like that, or I've done a single pitch route and my friend, my partner, couldn't get a piece of protection out when they seconded and I want to go down and try and retrieve it. So I've actually used one rope to fix to some really big strong anchors way back, and then I've clipped my abseil rope. Here it's a climbing rope, I'm just using the same rope for this job, directly into this power point. Before I do anything else, start throwing ropes around or down the cliff, I want to make myself safe. Now to do that, I'm going to create a cow's tail. There's all sorts of fancy cow's tails on the market now, but when I'm out climbing for myself, I don't carry them. It tends to be a work thing for me. But what I would have are slings, all sorts of different types. So I'm going to now make a cow's tail from this. I've popped the stitching just underneath my little finger again, just so that I always know where it is and I can keep it out of trouble. And then I'm going to take the other end, pop it under my belay loop, and pull the stitching to the sky. Keeps it out of the way. Hand span up the sling. I'm going to tie an overhand knot. Nice and neat and dressed nice and snug. And then I'm going to clip my carabiner into the head of this and then pop this into the anchor. It's really important when you make a cow's tail out of a standard climbing sling that you keep it snug all the time. If I was to shock load this, there's a very small chance, if I put a huge load through it, that the lark's foot can actually cheese wire through the belay loop here, which is a pretty terrifying thought. So the way to eliminate that hazard completely is to keep your cow's tail tight. So I'm going to go back and grab the stitching, and you can see I'm just pulling one side of the sling here, not both bits. I'm going to take a bite, lean forward a little bit, think about how snug I want that, and then here I'm just going to tie another overhand knot. Yeah, nice and neat. And then I'm going to sit back on that and get it snug. So there's no danger now of me shock loading this. Great. So I'm ready to lay my rope down the line. First thing I'm going to do is find the end of it. Here we go. Take an arm and a chest span and tie a figure of 8 just here. That took a couple of seconds, and this could seriously save your life. There's been an awful lot of terrible accidents, some of them fatal, where people abseil off the end of their rope. That takes no time at all. Bed it in as a standard way for you to abseil every time. Pop a knot in the end of the rope. Next then, I'm going to drop the rope down the line of the roots, so I'm going to flake it into my hand. You'll notice I'm doing that in lap coils either side. It's my uphill hand that's doing all the work. The hand that's got the coils in, I'm trying to keep it really still. That way, if I'm avoiding throwing it around like this, the loops don't latch into each other and I get a better clean throw down the root. Less likely that the rope then twists and catches on itself. Even though I am in my own back garden, the really good etiquette here would be to shout. So I would look down the line that I wanted to abseil and I'd project my voice to warn people that I'm about to throw the rope. Rope below! And I can see that's hit the bottom, so that's grand. Next then, I want to get ready to abseil. Just going to flip that round so it's all belts and braces. Now then, Some people will go for loading a belay plate first, and some people will go for loading a prusik first. I actually think it does depend. If there's quite a lot of weight on this rope, it makes it tricky trying to get it into a belay plate. In that instance, I'm going to go for putting the prusik on first. So that's the system we're going to have a look at next. So on the back of my harness here, there we go. So what type of prusik do I want? Well, this prusik is going to act as a backup for me when I'm abseiling. So when I'm actually going down, I want it to be able to move smoothly with me so that I can deliberately release it. But then what I need it to be able to do is if I suddenly let go, I don't know, a rock comes off and hits me or I get stung by a bee, the prusik would cinch up on its own. So for that job, I'm going to use a French prusik. So I'm going to offset the knot a little bit, just like that. Ooh. And wrap it around the abseil rope. Again, I'm being really neat, keeping the coils of the prusik next to each other as opposed to on top of each other. And I'm looking for that 4 to 5 double wraps, just depends on the thickness of your prusik. I want to even out the head and the tail. Like that. If I have this too tight, it won't slide. If I have it too slack, it won't cinch up in an emergency. So getting it just right just takes a little bit of fiddling. I'm now going to clip that onto my belay loop. And then I'm going to check that the prusik's actually working. So I'm going to give it a tug in both directions and it locks, that's great. The reason I've clipped it onto my belay loop rather than a leg loop is it means now it's ambidextrous. It doesn't matter which hand I want to have as my main controlling hand. Because it's in the middle, I can use either. So I quite like that as a technique. Next then, I need to get my belay plate on. If I was to put my belay plate here on the belay loop, the prusik and the belay plate would be too close together and the prusik would release. So I've got my cow's tail with that little knot that I put in. So this loop here is where I'm going to want to put my belay plate. Get it orientated the right way, so the teeth are facing down the way. That's going to be the best braking position for me. I'm going to pick up the abseil rope. Now I pick it up right from up here rather than down by the prusik, and you'll see why in a minute or two. That's going to go in there. And then right, because I've picked it up at the top, it's much easier now for me to tighten this like that. And the reason I do that is at this point I want to try and get my weight onto the rope and start to bypass the need for the cow's tail. So I'm going to get that as tight as I can right up there. Engage the prusik. There we go. So you can see now this is starting to go a little bit slack, and this is where my body weight's at. I'm going to want 2 hands to unclip the cow's tail at the top here. So I'm going to back the prusik up. As soon as you take your hands off the rope, always back a prusik up. They can slip, and they can do that with no warning, and the best case scenario is you're going to fill your pants. The worst case scenario is you could really hurt yourself. So now that I can be hands free, because the knot would bang up against this if it slipped, I can get rid of the cow's tail at the top. Gonna get rid of the knot here as well. People sometimes get in a bit of a quandary what to do with the loop of the cow's tail. Doesn't really matter as long as it's out of the way. It could go onto here, but maybe that gets in the way of the abseil rope. It could go onto your gear loop, Just be careful that when you do that, you don't have it tight, you don't clip it a long way back, because as you abseil and spin round, it's likely that it'll rip the gear loop off your harness. Some people will clip the rope as well, that's fine. All of those systems work well. Just pick one that's going to work for you. I'm going to go onto my gear loop there, and I've got that bit of slack. Right, so now I'm ready to abseil. Going to get rid of my backup knot. For the prusik to allow me to move, if I put a little bit of slack in here, you'll see, even if I want to, that prusik is engaging. And that's the whole idea. We've got a backup. Great. Always have a backup when you're abseiling. But if I actually want to go somewhere, I'm going to use my thumb and my first finger, and I'm just going to pinch at the top of the prusik and push it down the way. And you can see how easily that releases. And now I can feed the rope up, keeping the prusik disengaged, and away I go. If I let go of that, it cinches up tight again. So doing exactly what it's supposed to. Now then, if I get to the edge, and before I really commit myself, I'm going to have a look over and check that the rope is cleanly down the line. If it has hooked itself on a ledge, in a crack, something like that, quite nice to sort it now. So if it's going to require more than just a flick, if I can do it with just a flick, well, maybe I can manage that one-handed. But if it requires two hands, we're back into that need of having to put some sort of redundancy behind our prusik loop here. So I'm going to push the prusik up and engage it. There we go. So you can see it's starting to curl again, so it's engaging. And if I was going to do anything complicated that might take a wee while, maybe I've got to pull quite a lot of the rope up to relay it, I'm going to pop that knot in. I have given myself a little bit of space, and that's just so that when it comes to untying this, I've got a bit of room to manoeuvre. So that's in there, and now if I needed to, I could pull all the rope back up and throw it back down again. If I needed to take a piece of protection out that my partner couldn't get out, I tend to go with the overhand knot as well. For a quick adjustment to the rope, but one that still requires both hands, a leg wrap is a really good option as well. So for this, always go between your legs first. So I'm going to run it down here, pick the rope up on the outside, and just wrap it around my leg high by my gear loop. 1, 2, 3 is enough, but I'm a bit paranoid, so I'm going to put 4 in. Great. So this works as redundancy again for my prusik. So if for some reason this did slip, so here I've got the prusik completely disengaged, look, lean right back, this is acting as a backup for me. The only problem with this technique is it does get tight around the top of your thigh, and for any length of time, like maybe trying to get out a stubborn nut, it can be a wee bit uncomfortable. So I only tend to use it for quick fixes. Gonna make sure that's re-engaged again. There we go. Get myself out of here. Okay, there we go. Now then, the next thing I need to think about is the edge, where the rope is actually going to lay on the edge here. It might sound a bit weird, but I'm looking for a soft edge, and by that I just mean one that's got a gentle roll on it rather than a sharp 90-degree angle that's potentially going to damage my rope. So I've spotted one just here between my feet, so that's perfect. So as I come down, I'm quite careful to lay the rope in just the spot that I want it. Down I go. Down, safe and sound. Good etiquette once you're at the bottom, particularly if you're with friends and they're wanting to come down, it's just to shout up, rope free.